Hi guys, welcome back to Status of a Nation. Thank you for finding your way back here. And as per usual, we're going to be breaking down some of the biggest stories that have been happening over the week. This week is going to be a little different. This week, I'm not going to be talking about a bunch of different stories. I'm really just wanting to focus on one big story. And the main story is basically what we know is happening. Like, I feel like you all know, because if you don't know, I don't understand what you're doing. But it's fine, we're going to talk about it right now. Okay, so basically, for those of you who are unaware, the Trump administration has put an executive order on refugees and immigrants, right, and has halted entry and admission into the US from 7 of these Muslim-strong nations. So, what's an executive order? An executive order is basically an official statement from the president that basically talks about how federal agencies are going to be using their resources, right? So, let's use the wall, for example. So, when Donald Trump was talking about the wall, he basically put out an executive order on the wall. So what this basically means is that Homeland Security is going to be using any excess funds they have into this wall. So it basically makes it a federal priority, this wall, because of the executive order. I hope you guys kind of get what that means. So according to the US, the 7 Muslim-strong nations are Iraq, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Yemen, and Syria. So those are the 7 nations. So basically in this executive order, it says that for 120 days, that's what the ban is going to be for, because the US, they're saying that they want to implement a more rigorous vetting process that people from Muslim-strong nations have to go through. And Donald Trump is basically saying that the reason he's doing this is that he wants to give priority to Christians. And so part of this ban is Donald Trump saying that he wants to give preference to religious minorities. And in this instance, he's talking about Christians. So this is basically what he says. He says, we don't want them here.
Bruh.
We only want to admit those into our country who will support our country and love our people deeply. Okay. So another thing that they also say is that they will not allow people who engage in bigotry, any form of hatred, or seek to oppress Americans by virtue of their race, gender, and sexual orientation. I'm just going to want us to stop right there, because I can't be the only one who sees it, right? They say that they don't want people who are going to oppress Americans on the basis of their race, gender, or sexual orientation. But you know what? That's fine. We're gonna go through it. So, okay. So this is what Donald Trump also says. He says, I'm establishing new vetting measures to keep radical Islamic terrorists out of the United States of America. We don't want them here. We don't want to admit into our country the very threats we are fighting overseas. So as it stands right now, all refugees go through a very hectic vetting process, and it takes anything from between 18 to 24 months with additional screening for people who are from Syria and Iraq. So if you guys remember, when Trump was still running for president, this is one of the things that he mentioned, right? He did mention, his feelings and his views about immigrants and, people from Syria and all of those other countries. He did mention this. So I want us to all be aware that this isn't like coming out of the clear blue sky like a thief in the night. This is something that he mentioned time and time again that he's going to do. I think what's shocking people is that I think their hope was that it's one thing for him to say something, but it's another thing for him to actually implement it, which is exactly what he's doing. So during his run also, he mentioned a number of times that he believes that refugees and immigrants from Syria and Iraq are likely terrorists. Let's stop right there again. I mentioned this last week that what I find very troubling about Donald Trump, and I suppose it speaks a lot to his presidency, is some of the words that he uses and his choice of words. It's like when he says things like this, it's like people from this nation and this nation, or people of this religion are likely terrorists. You say that enough, and people who are already hateful and were looking for a reason for their prejudice, they're going to take that and they're going to believe it as something that is fact and something that is true. Right? But we all know how this administration up until this point has been about the facts. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to present the facts. These are facts that are out there. These are facts that you guys can look up for yourself. I'm not making any of this stuff up. This isn't #alternative facts. This is the real deal. So here are the facts. There's no proven link between terrorism and refugees. In fact, since 9/11, 800,000 refugees have been let into the US, and less than 20 of them have been arrested by the State Department on charges of terrorism. So I want you guys to think about those numbers and how it's so reckless for someone like who is the president of the United States to make that link when there isn't one. Secondly, according to a 2015 analysis by the New York Times, half of the terrorist attacks that were performed in the United States were done so by people who were born there. So again, there is no link between refugees and terrorism. What was interesting is that earlier on in the day, Trump spoke about remembrance, for Holocaust survivors, without mentioning the one little fact about it, the fact that it was Jewish people who were being persecuted on the basis of their religion, which is kind of what he's doing now. So the title of this order is Protecting Our Nation from Foreign Attacks by Foreign Nationals. We're going to stop right there again. Again, it's these words. Word choice is very important, and words mean things, especially when you're dealing with a group of people who are already filled with so much hate and prejudice towards a group of people because of their religious beliefs. By using these types of words, it further invokes a type of feeling and a reaction out of people. And I think it's irresponsible for the president to be using, the types of words that he's using. Now, the one thing that all of these nations seem to have in common is that they both have had violent interventions by US government, right? So 6 of the 7 nations are either currently being bombed or have been bombed by the US government in the past, with the exception of Iran. But we know that with Iran, they've been a bit of back and forth, including the cyber attacks. So what's weird about this, it's almost like a case of we break, you pay, right? Because the reason why people are leaving is because of all the violence that they're experiencing in their countries, because of what the US is doing in their country, only for the US to be like, thanks, but no, we're not going to let you in. It's like, I've said it before, especially when I think about South Africa, it's like whenever refugees come into our country, whether it's South Africa or in this instance, the US, people don't just leave home just because, because leaving home means that you're leaving your way of life, your traditions, your cultures, your family, your friends, how you're used to doing things. I don't think it's something that people undertake lightly to just say we're going to leave, So to simply treat it as something that's just like, oh, well, you just want to leave and whatever. No, these people are leaving because where they're at is dangerous. Where they are, they don't know what to do for themselves, for their family, and for their children. So another thing that Donald Trump has said is this: if you were a Muslim, you could come in, but if you were Christian, it was almost impossible. And the reason that was so unfair, everyone was persecuted, in all fairness. But they were chopping off heads of everyone, but more so the Christians. And I thought it was very, very unfair, so we're going to help them. So for Donald Trump, his motivation is basically to say that, things have been so unfair on the religious minority who he believes are Christian people. And so this ban is his way of saying that, the other children have had it easy, now I'm going to make it easy for Christians. Now, these are some more of the alternative facts. So now we're going to actually look at what the real facts actually are. So, according to a study conducted by Pew, in 2016, the US had accepted something like 38,000 Muslim refugees, right? But the number for Christian refugees was something like 37,000. So again, where does this whole belief or this fact that it was so much harder for Christians to get into the US? Well, when you look at the numbers and the actual facts, not the alternative kind, when you look at the facts, there is nothing to actually support that claim. Also, something to note is that up until last week Friday, there was no such thing as a religious test that refugees had to take if they wanted acceptance into the US. In fact, it was President Obama who said that he felt the whole idea of a religious test as something that's very shameful. And I agree. Because again, it goes back to what we're saying earlier on. That you have a prejudice against people because of their religious beliefs, nothing else. And you can't even tie anything that's happened. You have no legitimate reason to say that we aren't fond of this group of people. I mean, you saw earlier, we talked about the terrorist attacks. We looked at the numbers. The facts don't add up. So, the thing about this ban is that it also applies to people who have dual citizenship, right? So that's to say that if you're born in a country but you use the passport of another country. So let me give you an example. If you're born in Iraq, but you have a British passport, you still won't be allowed into the US. So it also, again, poses a challenge for people with dual citizenship. Now, when the Trump administration announced this ban of theirs, Sean Spicer, is that how you say it? Spicer? I mean, it kind of works because, he's spicy with the facts. He basically told the White House press pool that people from the Middle East have a predisposition to terrorism. Again, it's almost like they aren't hearing themselves. And you know what the problem is with this type of thinking is that it unfortunately causes people to go the other way. It causes people to say, well, let's take a group of people and actions that have been committed by, people of this group, and then just say all of them are the same. It's very, very dangerous rhetoric, in my opinion, to be saying so casually and to be saying it like it's fact when it really isn't. So another thing that I want to get into is Trump's VP. I mean, there's so many things that can be said about Mike Pence, a lot. But the one that I actually want to bring to everybody's attention is this tweet. What I want to know is what suddenly changed from December 2015 to January 27, when this was his view, and his view was that it's wrong, it's unconstitutional, it's all of these different things. What suddenly changed? Like, really, what is the truth here? That's really what I want to know. Like, what is honestly the truth? Because not that long ago, you could see how it was a problem, but suddenly it's fine. Like, what is going on? This US administration says that they're pro-life, but they're anti-refugee and pro the death penalty. I don't understand. Like, I don't understand how you could be all three of these things at the same time. I am so sorry. I don't understand how any of these three things can actually be at the same time. There's just no way. So with all of this basically going on, the next step or the next question is to basically ask what the rest of the world is saying with what's going on. So first up is Justin Trudeau, and he's Canada's Prime Minister. I don't know, I really like this guy. Something about him is just very, I don't know, like I've watched interviews of his and he's just, yeah. Iran also had something to say, which this is looking very much like a case of, tit for tat. I don't know. And I don't think it fosters great relations between countries and just as the world, and how people are gonna go on from this point to see each other. It's not going to improve relations. If anything, it's just going to further isolate people. So also had something to say. Amazon also had something to say. France had something to say. Sudan had something to say. Mark Zuckerberg also found himself with something to say. And I think for me, in all of this thing, what was really, really sad was, the people. I mean, I've watched videos, I've seen pictures of protests, and people who were at various airports protesting this. People were chanting, "Let them in," and it was just, and I think that's the heart of this thing. Beyond policy, beyond, different countries and how they do things, the heart of this is that there are people. There are people whose lives are at stake. And because of hate, that's all this is. Hate has really just bored people up until this point. I mean, I read the story about this woman and it broke my heart, because I'm like, again, people think that it's so light and it's so easy when people leave their countries. They're leaving because things back home aren't that great. This entire thing, like over the weekend, the videos, the protests, the various marches, it's boarded back home, and it's made it very real to me that at the end of the day, it's people. It's people. This is who is going to suffer. It's people. And then what I found interesting was what the Prime Minister of Israel had to say. This is what he tweeted. I feel like it's very telling. And isn't this the same guy that Musi Maimane went to go meet? And the same guy who's got interesting views on apartheid and policing? But we're going to get to that. I didn't forget about that. We're going to get there eventually. One last thing that we are definitely not going to do is this. we're not doing that. We're just not doing that, because no, we're not going to do it. Like, we're just not going to do that. There's no way people are going to act like that, because here's the other thing. What people need to realize, who do things like this, is that this man right here was from the Middle East. So if he was alive in the time of Trump, even he wouldn't be allowed in the United States. The same reason that people feel like there's a justification for what it is that Trump is doing. My knowledge, of God, and my belief lets me know that that's not the case. Lets me know that that's not the case at all. But that's just me. But very quickly, what else is happening? Really not much, or nothing that I want to get too in depth with. I mean, as far as, South Africa, this happened. But it's not surprising. I feel like we all kind of knew that that's where things stood. Secondly, Serena, she's the baddest. One of the greatest to ever do it. These are just the facts. It is what it is. But yeah, so thank you guys for watching. Please comment down below. Let me know what it is that you guys think. Let's keep the conversation going. But mainly, let's just keep praying for people across the globe. People from these 7 nations, Americans. And let's just be praying for people, because that's all I know to do at a time like this. So thank you guys so much for watching. Bye.